But one of the things that I heard when I first went to New Guinea, I heard the word Sanguma. You know, I could already speak Pidgin because I'd been a student missionary there. So I knew the word, I heard it, but I didn't understand it. And I heard people saying Sanguma. Sanguma. What is Sanguma? Anyway, I was on a patrol through the jungles, a 3-week patrol, walking through swamps up to your middle with leeches all over your legs. I learned, by the way, if you rub salt on your legs, the leeches don't like salt. And you learn to handle these kind of things. You couldn't see the sunlight for 3 weeks, the jungles were that thick. And beautiful birds of paradise flying around with their long tails of gold and green and silver, beautiful colours. Anyway, we're walking through the jungle and we're slowly getting into the mountains, huge mountains in the middle of New Guinea. And we hadn't been to a village yet. And I was listening because I had a young Australian missionary who had just been sent out to New Guinea, and they asked me to mentor him and train him in. And I said, well, who's trained me in? I'm in my first year in New Guinea and I've already got a disciple to train in, you know. And he was scared to death. He was not a great person to have on a trip like this. He was terrified. He only lasted 2 months in New Guinea and had to go home. He was having a nervous breakdown. Anyway, and I had 2 New Guinean missionaries with me, and they were all talking away in Pidgin. And I'm listening in. And I hear the word Sanguma. So I said, look guys, it's time for me to understand Sanguma. And every time I'd hear the word mentioned, I'd see a little fear in people's faces. I said, what is this Sanguma? Sit down and tell me what it is. I'm not going any further till I understand it. They said, well, we're coming to a village where they're practicing it. I said, really? They said, yes, you're going to see it. Well, I said, but what am I going to see? I want to understand it before I get there. They said, well, it's a form of magic. Well, I said, how does it work? So they said, have you ever seen a man have a haircut since you've been in New Guinea? I never thought about it, because we didn't have any shops or anything. So it's not, you don't see a hairdresser. I said, well, I guess I haven't seen a man have a haircut. Well, you never will. Because the hair, being such a concentrated part of the human body, is what they use to practice Sanguma, this magic. I said, okay. So I said, a man will go out into the jungle secretly, cut his hair, bury it in the jungle. But somebody from another tribe will be spying on him. They spy on each other. And they're so good during the jungle, you wouldn't even know they were there. You know? I'd be travelling for weeks and somebody would just pop up, just like that, and following me the whole time. Anyway, they said, so they spy on one another and they go and dig up the hair and they take it home and they start doing the magic. And they send a word to the man that they've got his hair and he prepares to die. Now, you know, we have expressions, some of them crude, like BS, you know, but in New Guinea they say Giaman. So in my ignorance I said, oh Giaman, you can't kill somebody with a piece of hair. What do I know? I grew up in a big city. So I said Giaman. Anyway, I said, well, just wait. We're coming to a very big village. I said, how do you know? We're out here in the jungle, you can't even see the sky. How do you know? This is basically unentered territory. How do you know we're coming to a big village? Well, we don't want to tell you that because you'll laugh at us, you know, because I've been talking to the trees and they're really branching out, you know. Anyway, several miles later on, we hear the drums and the singing. And we come to this big village as they predicted. I mean, a big village. I don't know if you can picture maybe 250 naked men, their bodies covered in pig's grease. And they're wearing, this is always difficult to describe in a mixed audience, you know. They're wearing those gourds. You may have seen pictures of them, hollow What is a gourd? It's kind of a long squash. Or
A gourd.
Gourd, yes. About this long. They're all in an interesting place, you know.
Yeah.
And I just fell on the ground and started laughing. Because here's a couple of hundred men in a circle and these things are flapping up and down like this is too much. I don't show these photos in mixed audiences. It was just the funniest thing I'd ever seen. And there's drums beating and they're all going like this and the gourds are flopping up and down.
That's Sanguma.
This was Sanguma, they were practicing it, yes. And they're in a circle. My young Australian friend went and fled and hid behind a tree. He was terrified. Well, I have a very curious disposition, so I pushed through the circle. And I went right into the centre because the witch doctor was in the centre of the circle. And he's the spiritual power in any village, controlling a whole village. And he had a little smoky fire. So I went over and looked, and there's a cow, a sweet potato, in the fire, and stuck into it little tufts of hair. I thought, wow, hair, that's what I'd been told. And he had a vine around it, and he was gently tugging the vine. And this guy grinned up at me, and I said, oh, this is the face of heathenism. His teeth were black from chewing betel nut, and his lips were bright red. That's the sign of chewing betel nut, which they mix with lime, and it's a hallucinogenic. My brother chews betel nut. Anyway, this guy grins at me, the witch doctor grins at me. He says, what's the name? I thought, you know, he's reading me in pidgin. Look at him. I said, yes, I can see it. So he's taking me every time I pull the vine. The man, they're very dramatic, the Guineans. They act everything out. He says he's feeling sick. They're very theatrical. You know? He's feeling sick. He's lying down. His wife he's describing all this to me as though he's there. His wife is asking him, what's the name? What is it? And he says to his wife, Sanguma. And she prepares for his death. And I said, oh, Guiama. What a great knowledge, Guiama. I mean, there's no way that this village is like 20 miles away. They've got the guy's hair. He says, when I pull it tighter, he's feeling very sick. If I break it, he dies. Oh, I said, yeah. Anyway, the dancing increases in intensity. The drums are being beaten, their gourds are flopping up and down. And suddenly, yes, that was me. All of a sudden he wakes up, and the sweet potato falls into the fire. And he grins at me and he says, give me that finish. He just finish on the end of the sentence in pidgin completes the action. I mean, he died, finished, he's done, he's dead. Oh, I said, yeah, man. So this guy challenges me. He said, well, come on, you go looking. Why don't you go to the next village and see for yourself? I said, well, that's a great idea. Well, I need to know, because if this thing is real, then my ministry is going to focus on leading these people into faith so they don't have to fear this. Because I'm telling you, I was walking through villages that had no men left. By the way, the women don't get involved in these things. They're too smart in the kids. Only the men. And they just kill each other off. You kill one of our tribe, we kill one of yours. It's been going on for generations. I've been to villages that basically have no men left, just boys. Because they're killing each other off through magic. So I went and found my compatriot who was hiding behind a tree. He says, you're still alive. I said, it's a miracle, isn't it? I'm still alive. I said, we're going on to the next village. We need to see if this thing is real or not. The witch doctor just told me that a man died in the next village. That means they'll be preparing for his burial. That means there'll be a lot of wailing going on. So we're climbing up the mountain now. On every ridge there's a village, you know. Anyway, we walked on 15 or 20 miles, and we heard the wailing. I had a sinking feeling, wailing, and that means death, you know. And this was loud wailing. And as we neared the village, the chief and the elders of the village all standing out waiting for us. They knew our names, they knew who we were. And there's no visible means of communication. This is as remote as it gets anywhere in the world. These people have never been outside their valley. They thought an aeroplane was a giant bird. I'm not exaggerating.
Wow.
I had a little 8mm movie projector, battery operated, that you could turn the handle and show little movies. And I made the mistake of showing them an African movie of the African animals. I lost my audience in 10 seconds. They thought these animals were really coming out of them. Ran to their life. I'd seen nothing. I mean, nothing. And yet they knew who we were. They knew what mission we represented. They knew when we would arrive. They knew all this. And if you asked them, how do you know, they went to the trees or the birds or something else. That's when I first began to realize this is not demonic, this is the natural world. We don't have that intimacy with the natural world that they have. Anyway, I said to the chief, what's their name, Papa? Someone will get another we cry out. Well, why are they all wailing? So I knew the answer to it already. All one fellow man and the guy, finish. You're hearing me, I know. Cheers again. And he said, yep, the man has just died. I said, what are you talking about him? He points to the sun. So I said to my young Australian buddy, I said, you know, that's approximately the time we were in the other village. So I asked the big question, and he darling Wayne.
How did he die?
Oh, poor very good. How did he die? That's exactly it. And it's spoken as rapidly as I'm speaking it, you know. And he said, Sanguma. So for the first time I had to accept the fact that even though I've been so skeptical, this actually works. It is devilish. I thought, wow, I'm dealing with something big here. It's wiping out whole populations. They need the good news here to be free from fear. So, you know, I'm a gardener. I told you I'm a gardener. If I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I'd be doing what you're doing, buddy. I love it. And I said to the chief, can I walk around the village and look for the plants? So I said, yes, anything you see you can take. You know, in New Guinea, nothing dies. You see beautiful orchids growing on a tree, you send someone up to get it, you take it home and just put it on your own post to them. And nothing, even your fences grow in New Guinea, yet nothing really actually dies, you know. It's so green and wet and hot. I was in the second wettest place on earth. 400 inches of rain a year. Do you like rain that much? I don't. That's why I live in a desert now. Anyway, we're walking around the village. I'm, you know, looking for plants and things to take back with me. There are 400 native orchids alone in Berrien, which you don't find anywhere else in the world. I was trying to collect them all. You know. And that's when I saw the tree. And I just stood there. I thought I knew every known fruit that grew in the world, especially the larger fruits. And up till now, the largest fruit that I've ever seen, and those of you that have Caribbean connection, you understand the breadfruit.
Oh, yeah.
It can be this big, you know, and green and knobbly all over. Very common, and in New Guinea, very common too. So I have never seen fruit larger than a breadfruit, but hanging from every branch of this tree was fruit so big, it would have taken two men with their arms out like this.
Wow.
I said, no way. I actually thought I was Livingston and I made an original discovery. You know? Well, no, this was so big, it would have taken you and me together with our arms out like this.
It was great.
And it was orange in colour like your, whatever you're wearing there. It was that colour. And I said, no way. I was excited. Every branch has it hanging down. So I ran over to the tree and I was about to slide my hand down the tree when one of the young men from the village came racing over and he pulled my arm back. You can't touch the tree. I said, why not? I knew this was going to be good. He said, Sanguma, D-Y, it's the Sanguma tree. Now I was really confused now because Up to this point, I'm understanding Sanguma as the magic. And he said, anyone who's ever touched this tree has died. He just saved my life. So I thanked him for saving my life, even though I knew it couldn't affect me, but I thanked him. He said, come looking, come back. He took me over and we stood underneath what I thought was a large piece of fruit. I thought it was a large piece of fruit. And I looked up and it was kind of hollow underneath. And I looked up and went, oh, hallelujah. It's a smoked body. A smoked body. Well, they're very good at smoking bodies. In fact, it's not a bad way to go if you're going to die. I begged my wife to promise me if I died in New Guinea, which could happen, that she would have me smoked so I could sit in the living room and grin at her forever and ever. She never had my sense of humour. And you keep all of your features, it's like being mummified. It takes 3 weeks to smoke a body. Very common practice. I've seen a mountainside with 2,000 smoked bodies all sitting on chairs. So you can look down over the village after you're dead. They're very good for you after they've killed you, you know. So I'm looking up saying, oh, this is a smoked body. And they've taken a bright orange bark off another tree and wrapped it around the bodies. And I'm being very logical. I said to the guy, well, if you can't touch the tree without dying, how did they get up there? Well, only the witch doctor has that power. This is how one person can control. I said, really? And I turned to my young buddy from Australia who's nearly losing his skin. I said, you know, I've just had a great idea. And he says to me, well, I don't want to hear it. Now, this is a really great idea. What if we put our sleeping bags down on the ground? Because we're up in the mountains now, it's going to get chilly tonight. And we put our feet up against the tree. And we sleep like that. That could be the biggest challenge they've ever faced to their traditional thinking. And he looked at me as though I'd lost my marbles. You know? I said, come on, don't tell me you're worried about putting your feet. It's only a tree, man. It has no authority over us. We're Christians. You know? He said, I'll tell you what, I'll put my sleeping bag down next to yours, but you put your feet up against it. I said, I can't believe what I'm hearing. He was truly terrified. So we got inside our sleeping bag because we knew it was going to be cool. And I lifted my feet up and put them up against the tree. And the moment I touched the tree, the little drums began beating. One of my great frustrations as a missionary was I could learn the languages, but I could not learn to read the drums. You know, some of the older missionaries could actually read the drums, and they would lord it over us, saying, "When are you going to hear the drums?" You know. And even though I was there for 10 years, I could never hear the drums properly all night. Because had I known what they were sending out, I probably wouldn't have slept so soundly. I fell straight asleep. Come to Kagana, man, that's this little village, because tomorrow morning will be the first time we've had bodies from the other world, the other outside of New Guinea. It'll be the first time we've had bodies to smoke and put up the tree. That's what they were sending out. And I fell asleep. And it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm right down inside the sleeping bag. Not even my head is visible because it's cool. Even though you're in one of the hottest countries in the world, up here in the mountains, it's snow-capped up there, you know. And I'm not the kind of person who wakes up instantly. I come to gradually. So I'm kind of just opening my eyes and thinking, what is that noise? This is a village of 200 or 300 people. But this is the noise of 2,000 or 3,000 people. And there's a huge crowd of people here. What are they doing in this remote little village? I started thinking, oh, the drums. The drums must have sent out a message telling everybody in this whole valley to come to this village. And they're all here. And they're excited. You know, the Guineans can't keep still and they can't keep quiet. They're jumping up and down, singing and dancing and shouting. And what are they so excited about demonstrating? Oh my goodness. Do they actually believe we're dead? So I whispered through the sleeping bag to my buddy, are you awake? And he whispers back, I haven't been to sleep. I said, you know, I do believe they actually think we're dead. He said, congratulations. I saw that hours ago. I said, you know, I had to turn to this, but I just had another great idea. Oh, he says, you and your great ideas. I said, just jumped into my mind. I said, you know, they think we're dead. So why don't we just pretend to be dead? I've always had a great desire to be present at my own funeral. Just to know what they're going to say, you know. So I said, don't move. He said, don't worry, I can't. We were lying on our backs, and neither of us had our heads out. And we just not moved. Well, he couldn't move, I chose not to move. And the chief stands up and orders, I wish I could have seen this. The chief orders a young man to come over and ascertain whether we are actually dead or alive. Because they all believe we're dead. So this young man, I'm sure very gingerly, very cautiously, comes over. He doesn't want to get too close to the tree. So he leans over like this and puts his hand where my head is, but he can't see me. And without knowing, he turns and shouts back to everyone who's present, two fellows don't finish, they're both dead. And 2,000 or 3,000 people just erupted in singing and dancing. You know what I said to myself? The devil has convinced them that his power is greater than ours. That they have a great victory here because we have died in the night. Anyway, we're still not moving. And the chief, a little wiser than everybody else, I guess that's why he's chief. He says to the young guy, Ralph, he calls it a calico, doesn't know what a sleeping bag is. Calico is a word for cloth, you know, any kind of cloth. Rousing is not a calico, pull it back, rousing the German word rouse, you know, pull it off. Because New Guineans are German, Japanese, Dutch, all these different influences in its history. Rousing is not a calico, pull it off. We follow like looking face for like two fellow, we don't see their faces. I don't know about you, but I am not the kind of person who can keep a straight face. It's a very funny situation. I have a wicked sense of humour. My father had it. Anyway, so I took a deep breath. I'm lying on my back, and I go like this. My eyes are wide open, and my cheeks are puffed out. And I'm just lying on my back. And this dirty hand comes sliding down my face. I don't know about you. I couldn't handle it. So as the hand came sliding down my face, and I sat up as I did it. And that kid jumped about 3 feet in the air. And before you could say Jack Robinson, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 people disappeared into the jungle. They were terrified. We found out later they actually thought we were reincarnations of their ancestors. We'd come back with different skin and different form, and we had died during the night, and we had the ability to resurrect ourselves back to life. We had that kind of capacity. That was their thinking, you know. And so they were actually looking at gods. The first time I've been compared to a god. And we laughed, my buddy laughed for at least 10 seconds. He said to me, you know, maybe they're angry with us. I said, I think we are in the prime position here. They are afraid of us. We're afraid of them. And for like 30 or 40 minutes, no one moved. And we just sat there. I'm still laughing, you know, trying to all running for their lives. And finally, the chief realized that he had lost some face there. He stood up. He was one of the first to run. He stood up. And I was going like this. And I go, same as you. Come on. And I just kept encouraging him, and he took a step, you know. I said, I've got him. And he started walking out of the jungle. He came walking right up to me. This has to be a prime moment. You know, I'm a new missionary. And this God's already giving me this prime opportunity. And this guy who's so wise, and some of these New Guinea chiefs, you know, I know that they've actually been in communion with God before any missionary came to them. Some of them had such high standards, high principles, and they were way above the rest of the population. They were obviously communing at a higher level. And this was one of them. One of my first encounters with the chief, and he happened to be that kind of man. And he stood before me and said, "Talk something on me." Sabi, the Spanish word now jumping into Pidgin. Sabi, talk Sabi, explained to me how you know the Sabi word. How you were able to touch our tree, your feet are up against it all night, and yet you still breathe. Can you explain that to me? I said, I can explain it to you. And I pulled, you know, the old Sabbath school picture rolls, and I had coloured the face of Jesus and the angels all into a dark brown colour so that the beginnings wouldn't be attracted towards a white God, you know, because God isn't white. His colour reflects all nations, you know. And because Jesus was Semitic, we know he wasn't a white God. And so I didn't want the New Guineans to be attracted to the wrong picture of God. So I drew out the Sabbath school picture roll. And I said, you know, I am a worshipper in the one true God. Papa, Islam on top, and this is Jesus who's picking me. It's very beautiful. And this guy stood there looking at the picture roll. I said, the only reason I am alive is because I am a worshipper of this one true God. And he said to me later, at that moment, he recognized that he was standing in the presence of a being who was greater than all the New Guinea gods put together. That's what he told me. And in that one moment of time, the chief moved from unbelief into belief. Just like that.
Wow.
You were asking how a whole tribe can become believers in New Guinea. They're like one family. And if the chief makes a decision, the whole tribe goes with him. That's why you target the chief. And God reached the heart of this chief, standing there in front of me. He experienced the presence of God. That's why I'm so respectful of people in countries where they have that closeness with the natural world, because they are closer to God than we are in our natural condition. Does that make sense to you? Just because of their closeness to the natural world, they have this proximity to God. We have to intellectually work it through and take our Bible studies and everything, but they sense it naturally. And so the chief entered into belief, just like that. So I left the two New Guinean missionaries behind, and I went back to the mission station, and I told them in 3 or 4 months I'll come back again. I cannot tell you what it was like. This was my first time to experience this, to go back to a village that's had missionaries only for 3 or 4 months. The tiny little huts that you had to crawl into on your hands and knees were gone. They had built little houses, thatched roof houses that you could actually stand up in. They had built a house low to a thatched roof church.
Amen.
On Sabbath morning when I arrived, a young man with a white lap he was wearing, he came out and blew the shell, summoning us all to worship. I couldn't believe this was the same village. And all the adults in that village were baptized during the weekend that I was there. And the chief's son stood up and shared a dramatic story with us all. He's 18 years of age. And as the light unfolded to him, he was convicted by God to go to a neighbouring village 20 miles away, enemies. And they welcomed him in, gave him his own hut to sleep in. He was a chief's son. And in the middle of the night, they crept in while he was asleep and cut his hair. And they started working Sanguma on him. This was a thrilling story to hear. And at the appropriate moment, when the dancing and the singing was done and they'd broken the potato, believing he was dead, they rushed into his hut to get his body so they could smoke him. He had awakened in the meantime. He'd heard the singing and the dancing, and he listened for the name of the victim, and was shocked to discover it was his own name. So he fell down on his knees and was praying, and they rushed into a hut to find the victim, and they found a young man praying to his God. And so another village was converted, you know. God's power was more demonstrated than taught, you know. They saw it in action and they entered into belief. So that was my first experience to realise you don't have to give Bible studies, you don't have to preach an evangelistic series. You could just reveal the power of God. And you will see conviction. So that's my Sanguma experience, which has taken half an hour about time.